Hi, it's Maura McKeever from Trinity Estate Planning again. In this week's EP 101, I'm going to talk about reasons that you might want to avoid probate. So we touched a little bit now on sort of all the foundations of estate planning. We've talked about the will, we've talked about dying testate, we've talked about dying intestate, we've talked about an option, which is a trust. So why do people generally want to avoid probate? There are a few reasons. The first reason is that in many states, the probate process can be very time consuming. In general, I tell my clients to expect at least a year to work through probate. Part of the reason it takes so long, quite frankly, is that probate really is for the purpose of your creditors. So during that year, you need to give notice to creditors. So if any creditors are owed money, they can come forward and say, hey, pay me before anything goes out to these heirs. A second reason that people like to avoid probate is related to the time. It's that it can become very expensive. Obviously, something that takes a year, there are costs associated with it. And some of those costs might be things like attorney's fees, filing fees. If you own real estate, you might need to obtain appraisals. If you're selling real estate, you'll have to factor in realtors' commissions. There are a lot of different factors. But in general, I tell my clients that the probate process will cost about 5% of the value of the estate. And depending on your circumstances, that could be a lot of money. If you have a smaller estate, of course, it's not a large amount of money. But if you're talking $1 million and you might potentially have to pay $50,000 out to go through probate, it makes people think. The third reason that people like probate, and probably my favorite thing about probate, is that it's a very private process. Because you've avoided going through the probate court, nobody knows what's going on with you. It takes you handle the administration of the estate in the privacy of your attorney's office. And many, many people are very private. We live in a world where there's a lot of information about us out on social media. And yet even still, I find that most people like to keep their personal business private. So those are just some of the reasons that people like to avoid probate. And again, it doesn't mean that you need to avoid probate. In your case, you might do an analysis and say, you know what, small estate, not very many assets, no creditors, we can kind of hang back and wait, and we don't care. We're really not that worried about privacy. Or on the flip side, you might say, you know what, we still have a small estate, but we value our privacy above all else, so we want a trust to help us stay out of probate. So those are just kind of a couple options. I'll be back next week with another episode of my EP 101.